The fight of the cobra and the mongoose is a classic drama often seen in India, and the outcome is largely the same. What do you think is the outcome? Who is the winner? It is the mongoose. The mongoose is not immune to the venomous bite, but it is faster and quicker in motion than the snake. If the snake were to bite the mongoose would definitely die. But because it is not immune to the venom, the poison would kill the mongoose. But the mongoose is faster, it is quicker, it is more agile than the snake. It moves out of the way. The cobra assumes a posture of defense and attempts to reach the animal by a sweeping strike. But the quick-moving mongoose jumps out of reach and comes at the snake from another direction before the snake can get into a striking position again. So when the snake has to bite somebody, it has to take a position of strike. So by the time the snake attacks and strikes at the mongoose being very quick, very agile, jumps out of the way. And before the snake can take its striking position again, the mongoose attacks it from a different direction. And when the snake tries to attack it in the other direction, the mongoose jumps out of the way and attacks it from a different direction. This constant movement tires and discourages the snake. And the mongoose is finally able to leap in close and bury its teeth in the snake's neck, usually severing the joints of its vertebrae. So when the snake has to repeatedly take a position and strike at the mongoose, and the mongoose has been jumping again and again in different directions, the snake gets tired and it slows down. The mongoose, on the other hand, is still very agile. It leaps close to it, it leaps on its neck. The mongoose buries its teeth in the snake's neck. It breaks the joints of the vertebrae of the snakes. Thus, the snake is killed. Sometimes it even takes the entire snout of the snake in its mouth and snaps at the vertebrae, thus killing and defeating the deadly cobra. You must have seen a banyan tree. It has very wide, green, shiny leaves. They are thick, and it has a very unique feature, that is the aerial roots. Its roots hang from the branches and touch the ground, and once they go in the ground, they take on the form of another tree. Thus, the banyan tree keeps expanding in size. A banyan tree can grow to the height of 100 feet, that is around 30 meters, and it can grow very, very large in breadth. The largest banyan tree in India is the Great Banyan. This tree is located in the Acharya Jagdish Chandra Bose Indian Botanic Garden in Shibpur, Howrah, near Kolkata. It is 330 meters wide. A 330-meter road was built around its circumference, but the tree continues to spread beyond it. There is another large banyan tree in Karnataka, near Bangalore. That is supposed to be around 400 years old, and it covers an area of 3 acres. This is a story about what the author saw as a young boy when he was sitting in an old banyan tree in his grandfather's house. Ruskin Bond spent his childhood with his grandparents. He was living with them since he was 4 years old. Though the house and grounds belonged to my grandparents, the magnificent old banyan tree was mine, chiefly because grandfather at 65 could no longer climb it. Children, he calls the tree magnificent. From here we can make out the grandeur of the tree, because it must have been very large for Ruskin Bond to call it magnificent. Why do you think the grandfather could not climb the tree? The grandfather was 65 years old, so his body had become stiffer than it was in his youth. It had lost a lot of its flexibility and agility by this time. On the other hand, Ruskin Bond could spend a lot of time in the tree. Why does the writer say the old banyan tree did not belong to my grandfather but only to me? That is because the grandfather could not climb the tree, and Ruskin Bond himself spent a lot of time in the tree as a child. Its spreading branches, which hung to the ground and took root again, forming a number of twisting passages, gave me endless pleasure. Ruskin Bond, as a child, found the banyan tree's aerial roots very fascinating. Among them were squirrels and snails and butterflies. The tree was older than the house, older than grandfather, as old as Dehradun itself. I could hide myself in its branches behind thick green leaves and spy on the world below. So he would see other creatures running around in the branches of the tree. Which creatures were those? He could see the squirrels and the snails and the butterflies amongst the branches of the tree. He felt that the tree was much older than the house, much older than grandfather. How old was the grandfather? He was 65. So, according to Ruskin Bond, the tree was more than 65 years old. As old as Dehradun itself. Now that would put the tree at more than 400 years old. I could hide myself in its branches. So he would love to sit in the tree and hide in its branches. And he would get a very good cover from the thick green leaves. And what did he do when he sat in the tree? He would look secretly at the world below. He would spy on everything that was going on below the tree. My first friend was a small grey squirrel. Arching his back and sniffing into the air, he seemed at first to resent my invasion of his privacy. Ruskin Bond, as a child, led a very lonely life because he did not have any siblings. He did not have any friends at that time. So who was his first friend? It was a small grey squirrel. Ruskin Bond feels that the squirrel did not like him invading his privacy. He resented it. He disliked it that Ruskin Bond had gone into the area which the squirrel considered his own. But when he found that I did not arm myself with a catapult or air gun, he became friendly. And when I started bringing him pieces of cake and biscuit, he grew quite bold and was soon taking morsels from my hand. Before long, he was delving into my pockets and helping himself to whatever he could find. So when did the squirrel become friendly with him? That is when he realized that Ruskin Bond did not mean to harm him in any way. Ruskin Bond's nickname was Rusty. So Rusty did not carry any catapult or air gun to hit the birds or to kill them, to hit or kill the birds and small animals. So when the squirrel realized he did not have a catapult or air gun, he became friendly with him. And when did the squirrel become bold? When did the squirrel actually grow closer to him? That was when little Rusty started feeding him with cake and biscuits. The squirrel would take the morsels or the little pieces of food from Rusty's hands, and the little squirrel became so daring and so friendly that he would go deep into Rusty's pockets and search for whatever food he could find there. He was a very young squirrel, and his friends and relatives probably thought him foolish and headstrong for trusting a human. He was a very young squirrel, and his friends and relatives probably thought him foolish and headstrong for trusting a human. So Rusty feels, here Rusty gives him human qualities. He says that the squirrel was very young, and just because he had become friendly with a human being, he was probably being considered as foolish and headstrong by its relatives and friends, because most animals do not trust human beings. And he felt that the squirrel's family and friends, that he was very foolish to trust a human being, because a lot of human beings kill and attack small animals and birds. Children, do you ever hurt an animal or a bird? No, I'm sure you don't. You're actually a very good person. In the spring, when Banyan tree was full of small red figs, birds of all kinds would flock into its branches. The red-bottomed bulbul, cheerful and gritty, parrots, myna and crows squabbling with one another. During the fig season, the banyan tree was the noisiest place in the garden. So what change came to the tree in the spring season? Well, the banyan tree was covered with its fruit, which were red figs. And a lot of birds and little creatures came to eat that fruit. Which birds came there? The bulbul, parrot, myna, and crows. How does the writer describe a bulbul? He calls it cheerful and gritty. Cheerful because the bulbul sings very happily, and gritty because it must have been eating a lot of those figs, perhaps fighting over them with other birds. The writer says that parrots, mynas, and crows were squabbling with each other. They were fighting and arguing with each other. That is how they were making so much of noise. No wonder that the banyan tree became the noisiest place in the garden, with all these birds flocking there and squabbling and shouting and fighting and chatting with each other.